Despite this specific information, the color, the make, and the model, there was a catastrophic breakdown in the dispatch center. The dispatcher, for reasons that remain a point of intense legal and public scrutiny, failed to relay these specific vehicle details to the officers already on the scene. The officers, believing they had completed a thorough search of the area, cleared the call and went back into service. Kyle Plush remained in that van for 6 hours. He was eventually found by his father, Ronald Plush, who had gone to the school after Kyle failed to come home. The image of a father discovering his son's body in the school parking lot after the police had already been there is a haunting indictment of systemic failure. The legal battle that followed resulted in a $6 million settlement, the largest of its kind in Cincinnati's history, and led to sweeping reforms in how 911 operators are trained to handle silent or muffled calls. The Powell family, a domestic fuse burning toward annihilation. If the Kyle Plush case was a failure of technology and immediate response, the case of Susan, Charlie, and Braden Powell was a failure of the long-term safety systems designed to protect victims of domestic abuse. This narrative begins in 2009 in West Valley City, Utah. Susan Powell was a vibrant young mother who lived in fear of her husband Josh. Josh Powell was not the stereotypical abuser. He was socially awkward, emotionally distant, and manipulative. He was a man who exerted control through psychological attrition rather than physical battery, making it harder for the law to intervene. Susan was no stranger to the danger she was in. She was a woman of foresight. She kept secret journals, hid videos detailing Josh's erratic behavior, and even wrote a letter to her family, stating that if she died, it would likely be at Josh's hands. On December 6, 2009, Susan vanished. Josh claimed that in the middle of a blizzard on a school night, he had taken his 2 young sons, Charlie, 5, and Braden, 2, on an impromptu camping trip. When he returned, Susan was gone. The investigation into Susan's disappearance was hampered from the start. While Josh was the primary suspect, the lack of a body meant that prosecutors could not bring murder charges. The case was further complicated by Josh's father, Stephen Powell, a man who had a sickening voyeuristic obsession with his daughter-in-law. For years, the Powell family lived in a state of suspended animation, with Josh moving his sons to Washington State to escape the scrutiny of the Utah investigators. The failure of the system culminated on February 5, 2012. By this time, Josh had lost custody of his sons, who were living with Susan's parents. He was allowed supervised visits at his home. On that fateful Sunday, a social worker arrived at Josh's rental house with the 2 boys. As Charlie and Braden ran toward the front door, Josh ushered them inside and locked the door shut before the social worker could enter. The 911 call placed by the social worker is a harrowing document of bureaucratic friction. As she stood on the porch, smelling gasoline and hearing the screams of the children inside, she pleaded with the dispatcher to send help immediately. The dispatcher, seemingly unaware of the high-risk nature of the case, asked routine questions that delayed the response. "He slammed the door in my face. I think he's going to do something," she cried. Inside the house, Josh had already attacked his sons with a hatchet. He then poured 5 gallons of gasoline throughout the rooms and ignited it. Within minutes, the house exploded. By the time emergency crews arrived, there was nothing left but charred remains. Josh had achieved his final horrific goal. If he could not control Susan or his sons, he would destroy them. The Powell case remains a benchmark for how Child Protective Services handle high-risk domestic violence situations, leading to the Susan Powell Act and other legislative changes aimed at preventing such predictable tragedies. 3. Loretta Pickard, the agony of the abandoned. While the first 2 cases involved complex mechanical or domestic variables, the death of 76-year-old Loretta Pickard in November 2018 was a failure of protocol over humanity. Loretta lived alone in Lakeland, Florida. She was a woman of dignity, but at 76, she was physically frail, recovering from a recent hip surgery that made her dependent on a walker. On the night of November 23rd, a fire broke out in her home. Loretta, realizing she could not navigate the smoke-filled hallways quickly enough to escape, did exactly what she was trained to do. She called 911, retreated to a room, and waited for the professionals to save her.